Nobody knows what Donald Trump is going to do when he gets into office for a second term. I'm optimistic about some of the things, certainly on issues like war and peace and getting away from censorship, some of the corporatism, particularly the kind that RFK Jr. addresses. I'm optimistic that things can be better in those departments, but ultimately, we do not know what Donald Trump is going to do when he begins his first term, him and his administration. But I have noticed on the left something interesting. You have your basic type of Democratic voter who was attracted to Kamala Harris's platform, who no matter what happens, they're going to crap all over it and say it's bad, Donald Trump's Hitler and a racist and all this other stuff. He could save puppies from drowning, and this kind of Democratic voter is going to say that. They're just never going to be happy with anything that comes, even if it's positive, from this administration. But there's a different kind of Democratic voter, or independent voter that leans left, however you want to look at it, who I still think is a liberal in a way that the other Democratic voters I just described are not. They don't care about, fueling the war endlessly in Ukraine. They support that. They don't care about the government censoring our speech. In fact, they're for that if it tamps down MAGA voices. But I think there's a different kind of left-leaning person that is still liberal and still thinks the First Amendment matters and being anti-war and pro-peace matters. I want to read to you a tweet from Cenk Uyger of the Young Turks, who's a longtime left-wing activist, certainly doesn't like Donald Trump, of which he says I'm about to get to, but a longtime left-wing activist, reliably anti-war, certainly during the Bush era, and somebody who I don't agree with on a lot, particularly economics and different things. He had this to say in a tweet or a post on X this week, and I'll read from Cenk Uyger, quote, "I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election. Even though I was so against the guy who won, I know now. MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated." I think that's a pretty positive statement. Even more important, arguably, not to downplay Mr. Cenk Uyger and his stature, was Matt Gaetz, who is a former congressman, certainly knee-deep in the MAGA world, and was going to be a nominee, and that didn't work out so well, but we won't get into that. Matt Gaetz retweeted Cenk Uyger, and he had this to say: "MAGA is not your enemy. If you want to replace the mindless establishment with creative thinking, unburdened by the special interests which have ruined Washington." Cenk makes some good points here, and people should welcome these types of coalitions in our era of political realignment. That's a positive statement as well, and I think Matt Gaetz is right. If we're going to have some good things come out of Trump's second term, and whatever comes after that, who knows, it's a crazy world, it might require a coalition of principled people on the right and principled people on the left, or the old left, people who still remember what it means to be liberal and have those principles. And this is not new. There are going to be people on the right, anything left, we don't want anything to do with that, we got to own the libs. Well, you just own the libs in about the biggest way possible by winning an election. I think that own the libs mentality is stale, and we need to work together to have positive outcomes. You're going to have people on the left, like I just described, the Democratic voters who wanted Kamala Harris to win so badly, who's just going to be down on anything that happens under the Trump administration. But there's a principled left and there's a principled right that could work together in the way that Matt Gaetz suggested, in the way that Cenk Uyger sort of illuminated, that I think could do some positive things. And what I want to stress today is this is not new. I am a product of the Ron Paul revolutions of 2008 and 2012. When I saw what Bernie Sanders was doing in 2016, I'm like, I'm not a socialist, Dr. Paul's not a socialist, but this youth energy and this organic support for Bernie Sanders in 2016 represented sort of the coalition that could exist, as does MAGA right now, as Cenk Uyger said and Matt Gaetz said. Don't listen to me talk about this. Let's listen to what Ron Paul said at the height of Bernie's 2016 presidential campaign in an interview with Larry King.
I know you disagree on a lot of things, but is there a part of you that feels a kinship with Senator Sanders?
Yeah, there is, because he stands on principle, and on occasion we agree on those principles, because we used to kid each other. We would support some legislation, And people would say, how are you doing this with a socialist? I says, we're both against corporatism. We're both against the special benefits to big business, which was true. But, his answer to that wouldn't always be the same. Mine would always drift to the free market, and his would drift to, well, we need more government to redistribute wealth. But we could both attack subsidies to large corporations or the military-industrial complex.
Exactly.
So in that sense, there is a kinship. Matter of fact, I believe that the coalition of libertarians and progressives is a good coalition. I had a much better development of that coalition with, say, Dennis Kucinich. We understood each other.
Yeah.
We supported a lot of the same issues. And I think that's how we should get together. We shouldn't have it where I have to compromise my sincere beliefs and somebody who from the left have to compromise their beliefs. I think you can come together without compromising just because we overlap. That, to me, would be a much better coalition.
And who can argue with that? I remember during the 2008 presidential campaign for Ron Paul, so many supporters wanted Dennis Kucinich, who's a former Democratic congressman, very, very left, to be the VP on Ron Paul's ticket. And for a lot of people who don't remember that history, this is weird. Well, we're in a new place. We don't know what's going to happen under MAGA. It could be a lot of bad stuff, and I expect some bad stuff. I'm not that optimistic that I think it's going to be paradise. There's going to be especially tariffs. I'm worried about that. But on issues where progressives and libertarian-leaning conservatives, MAGA people, however you want to look at it, who have that ideological viewpoint, where we can agree and meet and come together, I think it's a beautiful thing. What Ron Paul just said right there, what Matt Gaetz said in his ex-post, and what Cenk Uyger sort of alluded to in his ex-post. I would love, in this environment, out of all this hatred and craziness, to see something good come together, like a left-right coalition that can be for peace, for being pro-free speech and against censorship, and against all the big government we don't like together, where we can agree. I say let's get it on, let's bring it on, make it happen.